You've described this as kind of an accidental series. So can you tell us a little bit more about the other books and how they fit together?
Yeah. Lost Dog is the first mystery book I wrote. I had been experimenting with other kinds of fiction before that, and I hadn't quite reached the point where I was ready to be published. And I decided to try my hand at mystery. It was something that I'd loved to read since a child, but I'd never given myself the chance. So as a first book, I conceived of Lost Dog as a chance to try something that I'd never done before, but I never assumed it would be anything except its own novel. It's a story about a young man who finds a dead body in a park real early one morning. He's a troubled fellow himself, has been in fixes with the law due to a problem with kleptomania and some impulse control issues. And so things do not go well for him in the aftermath of finding this body. And it gets worse when the killer targets him for as someone that needs to have a little bit of, you might call negative attention. But of course I wrote the book and I thought it's going to be done and then I'm going to think of something else to work on. What happened though is one of the police investigators in Lost Dog is Detective Skin Kadish, who turned out to be a really fun character to write in third person. He's very important to the story, but he's not the main character. So then when it came time to work on my second book, the plot idea actually came from my wife, who suggested an investigation of a series of deaths of men who were all suffering from cancer and all shared in common the same doctor. All of a sudden, Skin, an older career detective, probably nearing the end of his career at that point, was a natural to maybe be one of those men. And that created an opportunity for him to be the one to investigate these deaths. And of course, once he does, it turns out that things are, far more complicated than they seem on the surface, and we delve into his own experience with treating his own cancer, and at that point, that's my guy, Skin Kadish. I wouldn't say he's an extension of myself, but he's the guy that looks over my shoulder and comments on what I'm doing sometimes. And so he then became natural for day one to continue.
A little bit of your voice is his voice, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit, and he also gives me a chance to explore some things that I wouldn't normally think of for myself. His values are not all my values, although we share some things in common as well.
Well, and I'm glad that Kadish is the character you identify with. Some of the other characters are a little, they're protagonists, but they've got their kind of unsavory aspects. Igor Gillespie's, as you say, sort of a grifter, skateboard bum. And Peter McKay in the first novel, a lot of the book sort of revolves around him, but he's unlikable for much of the book. Where do you come up with these sort of unlikable protagonists?
Well, of course, I'm not setting out to write unlikable or not. What I'm setting out, of course, is to write compelling.
Right, and they're very realistic. We all know people like this.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tap into that notion that we all have a little something that's a problem. We're not all perfect, and Peter was a great example of somebody who tried really hard to be a good guy and just failed. He just had issues that kept coming up and biting him, and at the same time, I wanted to tell a story that gave him an opportunity to find some path to redemption. And I think if there's a theme that runs through all of my books, it's this notion that people, no matter how difficult or how horrible some of their choices have been, they at least have a chance to find their way to redemption. Not all do, but my hope is to show that no matter how unlovable someone might be, there's still something in there that I think is worth giving a chance to, at least until they make it too hard.